Okay. Mr. Nickel, on item 6B, Delta levy conditions and DWR maps.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll be very brief about this particular agenda item. Just for a little bit of background, if you might recall, the council asked DWR to produce some maps that basically outline the Delta levy conditions as best they know it. I think it was about a year ago, or perhaps just slightly less. And
I think it was on our first meeting in
perhaps
April
2 years ago.
2010, but I could be wrong.
I was being generous. And so I think that was based on some of the levy survey work that DWR has done in the past. And so what DWR has done since then is that they've taken some data they received from a 2007 aerial topographic survey that they conducted and basically attempted as best they could to turn that into a map in conjunction with information they've received from some of the local levee maintaining agencies. And they worked together over the last year or so and basically put these maps together. And what they've done is they've submitted a package of information to us that I'll admit that we're still going through in order to fully understand what they've given us. But in the interest of transparency, we've posted most of the material that we've received, and I can run through it real quick as to what we have and what we do not have. But to date, what we've essentially received are two maps that I think everybody has in the council members' packets as well.
Yes.
We had a stack, and one is percentage of Delta levies that are meeting the HMP levy guidance compliance map, and then the other one is those that are achieving the PL 8499 guidance, or a levy standard rather. And so, along with that data, DWR had also provided us a transmittal memo, a detailed listing of analysis, assumptions, and limitations on how the data was collected, how it should be viewed, how it should not be viewed, how it should not be used, a disclaimer, etc., as well as a very large summary table of a lot of the data was received from the local levee maintaining agencies, etc. So we're still kind of churning through that, and DWR would certainly be the best party to be able to come to the council and present this information and explain how they develop the information and what conclusions can be drawn from it. So they've accepted the council's invitation to appear. They were unable to make it to this meeting, but they have committed to come to the next council meeting, which I believe will be in March. So,
can I make a suggestion for that
Sure.
council meeting? I think we need from you, since a lot of this is actually professional technical information and evaluation, we need a summary outline of what you can understand from it and what information you think is valuable and what we need to move forward on. I'm afraid that just a map talking about how it got assembled and where it got assembled and all of that doesn't lead us into the policy issues that are part of the Delta Plan, our consideration of the next item on the agenda, and all the other things. And I want to make sure we do that.
We could talk a little bit about that this morning, but we'll want to have DWR to complete the conversation.
Okay. Now, it's my understanding you said these maps are now on our website.
Yeah, the two large maps are on the website. They were posted yesterday. We have also received from DWR individual island maps. The file
comparable or individual islands that together collectively lead to that map.
Yes, that collectively yield these specific maps. And so our IT staff is working to disassemble and then reassemble that file in a format that we can put it up on the web and people can access it and it doesn't crash systems. And so that'll be our first cut. I think what we hopefully envision down the road is developing a web-based format that might be a bit more interactive such that they could access the larger Delta-wide map, click on islands, bring up the individual island-specific map presentation as well as tabular data that we, to the best extent we have it. So how soon we get that up and running, I don't know. We'll have to work with our IT staff. But again, for the interest of this meeting, we were trying to get up what we could. So the items that are listed, the 7 items that are listed in the staff report, are basically what we have to date, which is primarily these two maps, some transmittal documentation, disclaimers, limitations, etc. And so, again, until DWR can really show up and better delve into this, what we see is what we get right now.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, just a question on the legends for the two maps, and that's where it kind of shows up when you compare the two, because in the PL 8499 map, you have 4 variations of from 0 to 100. In the HMP, you have 5 different categories, and one where it just kind of jumped off the map to me was we take RD813 up kind of the north eastern part of the map. You go on the one map, it's 50 to 79% on HMP, and then it changes color as it would with a different legend on the PL 8499, and it's 1 to 79%. So, I mean, it's hard to know because your breakdown is not the same. That's not anything that you can govern. But I'm just curious: is that how do you do a real, good comparison if you do a cross section, interactive or not, if you've got 2 different measures here?
Right. No, that's a very good question, a very good point. I mean, I think we'll really have to ask DWR what went into their thinking as they developed a specific structure for both of these maps.
Well, yeah, because if you're going to do a comparison, then not that you can't. I guess you could go island by island or area by area and decipher that out. But if you're just taking a look at these, then I don't know what the data is that came behind.
And the other maps that they have that we haven't been able to get up yet actually are island by island, and you can actually see what the status is of the levees around each island. So I think that will help address some of your questions when we actually can get all of that information.
And I think it'll be very useful when DWR is here to probably pull up a couple of the specific island maps, and so we can run through those and one can see how the data was derived and how it tends to be reflected upon the broader map.
Yeah, because one's a finer cut. I mean, 1 to 79% in compliance, that's a pretty wide spread. And then you've got 2 segments between 80 and 100, and this one over here actually breaks it down kind of in quarter sections in percentiles. So, again, I guess when they're here and we get a chance to see some of the other data that comes forward, but it just was kind of curious to me as to why you wouldn't use a similar measure for your legends. So.
Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Nickel, I know you mentioned to me this morning about the fact that as we get complicated graphic information, our website may run into some problems with accumulating this, and you told me we might be exploring some overall solution to the problem. Maybe you ought to mention that just briefly.
Well, I think the challenge they're having now is not necessarily a technical challenge. It's just a bit of time to assemble the files in a format that are usable for the typical website user. I think maybe what you might be referring to is we may be considering just as a staff down the road is to having perhaps more of a GIS-based mapping environment on the website such that you have more of your typical base map and then layer structure where you can have a base map and then simply click on and off the various data layers that you might wish to see. But we certainly don't have that established now, and we probably wouldn't be able to transfer this particular information into that format, as I understand it, in the short term. But I think that's certainly worth exploring as we move forward.
Okay, when DWR comes back to explain the maps, can you guys work it out so that they can explain whatever they want, but you start to tie it into our functions and responsibilities and the plan and what information might be useful to consider at some, I mean, just link it rather than, the problem I think with technicians is they'll tell us everything technically, and I want to make sure I understand a process to draw from that information we need.
Yeah, well, I think big picture wise, it's worth thinking, this is of the 1,030 levee miles that are in the Delta, this is information about, if I understand it, 715 miles of those, the non-project levees. And, if you look on a RD by RD basis, and the RDs don't quite coincide with islands, because some islands are a couple of RDs and some are maybe a couple of islands in a single RD. 53 of the islands that have been surveyed aren't up to HMP standards someplace. And, of course, it's the weak spot that's the problem. So that's one thing to think about.
When you say someplace, you mean somewhere along the
along the perimeter levee in the RD that it doesn't meet the HMP standard. About 40 of 93 do meet the HMP standard. 25 of the 93 are at the PL 8499 standard. And it's about 325 miles of levees that would need upgrades to bring the whole system up to the PL 8499 is what we understand from these maps. And that's not too different, actually, from what I think the economic sustainability plan suggests. I think, actually, this might be a little bit lower. And if, who knows what that'll cost to build out. There's a variety of estimates, but you think the most recent projects we've seen, the ones that we heard about from East Bay Municipal Utilities District last month, and they had little elements of ecosystem restoration, but they maybe were representative of what you might expect. Haul costs might be different, borrow costs might be different in various places, but those were about $1.56 million a mile to improve. So you can look at this information and begin to get a sense of, what the order of magnitude expenditures, might be, and also the kind of level of effort in terms of the number of reclamation districts that would be involved if we, worked through the current administrative system to bring all these levies up to the HMP or the PLA 499 standard.
I should have thought of this in our previous discussion, but I didn't. In the territories in the Central Valley Flood Plan study area that fall within the statutory delta, is the information on levee conditions in that draft DWR plan the same as reflected in these maps? And if not, without explaining it here, when the next time comes around, other than lining up people and shooting them, can you explain to us how it happened and how our staff is going to resolve these problems should they exist?
Yeah, but I think, if I could jump in real quick, Dan, the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, again, was primarily looking at project levees or state plan of flood control facilities, and this survey, for the most part, did not cover those.
But they do have that fuzzy language in the plan about levees near
Right.
Central Valley Flood Plan levees or jurisdiction or projects of benefit. I have no idea particularly what that meant, but just inform us, because I want to make sure, to the extent possible, all this works together.
Well, we can certainly have key up with DWR the need to address that, but my understanding is actually between the two, we kind of have the whole mosaic. So their survey is primarily looking at non-project facilities, and then in conjunction with existing knowledge of the project facilities, I think we've got a pretty good picture. Okay. DWR can certainly make sure they highlight the overlaps and gaps, if any exist, when they show up.
Okay. Okay.